Hi, today is Monday the 5th of August. My name is Holly Timlin. I am from Katanning, West Australia. I am making a video on Katanning, and the reason I'm making this video on Katanning is I am what is referred to as a targeted individual. I am targeted with electronic neurological weapon for research. I am also used as a human medical guinea pig for medical research here in Katanning. When this first started nearly 22 years ago in Katanning, I started researching the town and its infrastructure in order to find what could be doing what was being done to me. Now, my research has led up some very dodgy and some very scary avenues, as far as I think the Australian government have a lot to worry about as far as what's going on and their lack of inhumane ways of going about it. We'll start with Katanning's simulations. Now, this simulation that was done by Professor Peter Campbell is a complex adaptive systems simulation. Now, this simulation is agent-based, and the fact of the whole process from when Professor Peter Campbell, who had spent 22 years in America, he was the director of Argonne National Labs. Now, what's happened is he returned to Australia in 2000, in the year 2000. From 2004, he went to the Defence Systems, what do they call it? The Defence Systems Institute at the University of South Australia. Now, why he took on this position at Defence Science, he also took on a 3-year contract for CSIRO's Complex Systems Science Initiative. Now, this 3-year contract he did while working for Defence was a contract of Katanning's simulation, a 3-year contract to do a simulation of Katanning. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but when you've researched Professor Peter Campbell in his position as director of Argonne National Lab, who comes to Australia, takes up position with Defence, does this 3-year simulation of Katanning, which we'll get to that. He did it in his capacity of Argonne National Lab. So it's not just for Australia, it's not just for Defence, it's also for America's Argonne National Lab. Now, Argonne National Lab is the birthplace of the Manhattan Project. I'm going to touch on that in another video in regards to that project. Now, so this Professor Peter Campbell, he was in November 94 to 2000 Director of Advanced Computer Applications Centre, Argonne National Lab, responsible for both market development and technical direction, with a focus on modelling and simulation systems for logistics, battlefield environment representation, hydraulical planning, healthcare, meteorology forecasting applications. Now, he initiated development of agent-based simulation approaches to complex adaptive systems involving human interaction with systems and organisations as a means of developing decision support tools for federal agencies. Now, to me, decision support tools for federal agencies, when the EU framework program, which Australia is very much involved via Marie Currie, is the gateway for the Framework 5, Framework 6, and the Framework 7. Now, the Framework 7 Etica project, you are talking neurological research, you are talking remote neuro interfaces, you're talking brain-computer interfaces. They're not just talking one-on-one on an individual level, they are talking of a whole town in one part of it. Now, so if neurologically the Etica project have concerns on two words, is to neurologically coerce and persuade. Now, if you're being neurologically coerced and persuaded to be set up for decision support tools for federal agencies, that's entrapment at the highest level. Okay, now, so he also set up for the Office of Secretary of Defence the JWARS program test bed. Now, this is a simulation system for the US military. Argonne National Lab also set up it mapped out the virtual world for the US military. So he, as far as logistics, battlefield environment representation, Peter Campbell set it up in America at Argonne National Lab before coming to Katanning. Argonne National Lab, like I said, is the birthplace of the Manhattan Project, but it is also the birthplace of the Globus Project. Now, the Globus Project was a project that was set up for global researchers in the very, very early days. Now, the Globus here in Australia is Globus Medical. Now, when it comes to medical, this is all going to be put onto another video I'll do. The NOJA, NOJA, switchgear substations, is a global platform. It's a new integration with digital power. They GPS the power lines, the smart system that's on that. Now, that was set up and it does very much, you can call it telemedicine, you can call it virtual surgeon. It can monitor people in their home with medical devices. It's more or less being set up for urban environments where elderly and people have trouble getting to the cities in order to get the medical care required. It's smart technology. Now, so all this has been set up in America. This Professor Peter Campbell does this 3-year simulation for Katanning, and then he shoots away down to, in 2010, he joins the University of Wollongong at the Smart Infrastructure Facility. Now, when Professor Peter Campbell joined the Smart facility at the University of Wollongong, which is the Smart facility, it's the Internet of Things, it's cloud computing, it's all under one basket. And it's Professor Peter Campbell, and it's as far as I'm concerned, Professor Peter Campbell and a Dr. Matthew Berryman. Now, so he does the simulation of Katanning. After 3 years, he scoots down to the University of Wollongong. Now, the Smart Infrastructure Facility, from the simulation that Professor Peter Campbell did, which I'll get to in a minute, it ends up at the Asia Pacific Complex Systems Conference in 2007. Now, from that, which it's Katanning, from that, it comes about another Smart Infrastructure Facility paper Simcat Katanning's virtual lab. Now, is that virtual lab? It's meant to be to monitor the effects of the weather, we'll put it. But it's a virtual lab. Now, was that done by Professor Peter Campbell? Was it done by Katanning simulation? Was it done for defence when he was working for defences? Why he was doing this 3-year contract for CSIRO's Complex Systems Science Initiative. Right, so this simulations that Professor Peter Campbell's done, as well as Argonne has mapped out the virtual world for US soldiers, it takes us to the actual simulation I want to talk about, which is coupling biophysical and social models, conceptual models, and implementation details for a simulation of the Katanning zone. Now, this is Professor Peter Campbell, Argonne National Lab, supporting CSIRO's Complex System Science. This goes on to say the interactions are non-linear and at any time are driven by the from the context arising from the interaction of humans with their social and physical environments. Like any other system in which humans are involved, this is a complex adaptive systems. So we are in a complex adaptive systems. Now, with Professor Peter Campbell, there's also a few other names attached to this simulation. One of them being Angela Warden-Johnson. She's the environmental scientist at Murdoch University, West Australia. Now, she goes on, people in context, critical social dimensions in a complex landscape system. So to me, that people in context, me and the rest of the community in the Katanning zone. People in context, critical social dimensions in a complex landscape system. Now, does that mean neurologically uploaded into the system? Which would be the EU framework. Framework 7, FP7, Horizons, H2020. You've got to have vision before horizons. From there, this goes on to say coping biophysical, social models, conceptual models, and implementation details for a simulation of Katanning. Now, this is with agents, agent-based modelling working group and human ecosystem modelling with agents. Now, that agent, I have looked into it, and it's very compatible with Swarm, which is what Department of Defence are using as Swarm. When it comes to their tactical data packet network, that is an ad hoc network. Now, they are mobile ad hoc networks. They work with Swarm, and that that's on another video. I'm going to make another video on that. Now, the next page I go on to is once again at the University of Wollongong, which Professor Peter Campbell went down and decked out. Some complex systems engineering principles. Matthew Berryman and Professor Peter Campbell. Now, like I said, the 8th Asia Pacific Complex Systems Conference, COSNET, major sponsors COSNET. COSNET Wicker, once again, that is Dr. Matthew Berryman. COSNET is Complex Open Systems Network, which has complex open systems of systems. Now, Dr. Matthew Berryman is the organising committee for this. Then it gets on to the simulations of Katanning. I want to point out, because I'm going to include and more or less amalgamate a complex adaptive systems into Department of Defence's MIL-SATCOM. Now, what you need to do is study military command control as a complex network. Now, command control is a C2. So study military command control, study the military C2 systems as a complex network. Now, the paperwork I have is with the C3 intelligence systems and with a Paycheck, a program called Paycheck, Pajek. Now, this is audio, video, large amounts of video, audio. And in order to where I'm going with this, I'm going to read this. This is a system, mission systems and simulations paper, Jeffrey Tweedle, E-Operations Division. Now, to simulate a complex adaptive systems ground floor to work in sync with an operational control, command control C2 system. So what I'm trying to do is have the ground floor as a complex adaptive systems with defense platforms that are interacting. So I'll read this. Unlike entities, soldiers train more effectively as a team because that's how they fight. Hence, it is necessary to connect a large number of simulations together to achieve the scale required on the battlefield in a single virtual environment. In 1983, DIS, which is Distributed Integrated Simulation, was used by the Defense Advanced Research Agency, DARPA, to achieve this goal. Over 5,400 simulation entities were programmed into a single combined scenario. Now, so we've got the system happening, the complex adaptive system. We're going to study the military command and control as a complex network, which brings me to incorporating C2 simulation into operability service into an operating to C2 system. So if you study the military command and control as a complex network, well then the complex adaptive systems ground floor is a C2. Incorporating C2 simulation into operability service into an operating C2 system. Now, what Department of Defense, from what I believe, they use a system called MAX, which is a VR, V-Exchange. It's a simulation C2 system. It's networking simulations to a C2 system with MAC. Now, the VR Exchange, the Mac VR Exchange, got sold in 2005 as a COTS, commercial off-the-shelf system. So this is all intertwined with COTS. Now, I'll keep going with the loaded loop, a complex adaptive systems model of command control C2 processes in combat. The loaded loop, a complex adaptive systems model of command and control C2 processes in combat. Merging worlds, complex adaptive systems science meets systems engineering, a foundation for complex adaptive agent-based modeling architecture. Now, this is a Wright-Patterson Air Force Base paper and L3 communications. That's all you need to know. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and L3, which is L3 Oceana, which will go back to Oceana 84. Strategic networks, data and cities as complex adaptive systems. This is another paper, and the reason I've got this paper is, I can show you, all because of this little picture here. This little picture is exactly the same as the ones I collected many years ago from Defence's site, and it's in regards to complex adaptive systems. And these particular pictures end up not just for Australia. Northwestern University's researchers have developed a method of controlling complex networks such as your internet, your power grid, and air transportation. So what happens is, ground floor, if it's been complex adaptive systems, it can work in where the worlds do merge. It's SimCity. You are living in a simulated world. Now, for Katanning, the simulations that have been done, those of Peter Campbell's, which I've read to you, there have been emergency airway skills and crisis simulation management for Katanning. The digital power Muja power supply, Katanning's power supply. Muja and Collie, it's known as Muja Collie power supply. It is actually, if you do a total search, it is Transfield Worley Power Services. Transfield Worley Power Services gets Rheinmetall Defence, wins its second simulation project for the whole of Australia. Happens to simulate Katanning power supplier, and so that's been simulated. That puts us onto a global platform of 12 super, well, they would have to be, I'm saying super, I haven't got it written, but there would have to be supercomputers. For Katanning's power ends up in the middle of Australia, where the Defence's DNOC centre is, which is also where Taronga's. So all Australia's power ends up, after being simulated, in the middle of Australia. That is one computer. America has computers. Canada, Asia, Russia. So there are 12 computers for the power. Now, so if a chain was to be set up for a global simulation platform, Australia is in the middle of Australia, so that would link up and you'll have a chain, which I will go on to do another video as far as the simulations and the platforms for that. Right, where were we? So the airport's been simulated. Katanning's airport's been simulation, which they would need that for fly in, fly out, for their emergency airway crisis simulation managements. The American Air Force have Katanning's radio frequencies. I have all this documented. I have them printed off the internet. Katanning is, what else have we simulated? America has Katanning has a microwave repeater station, ground floor, which falls under the WiMAX group for the advancement of the IEE 802.16, which, when it comes to wireless body area networks, you need an 802.11, an 802.15, and an 802.16. Now, your IEE 802.11, that is set up in your computers, your internet. It's already from Sydney. If you're in Australia, it's from Sydney. Well, that's where mine says it comes from, and I've got that. An IEE 802.15 and an IEE 802.16. The 802.16 is on a global platform for the net-centric warfare, which is like I said, it's your WiMAX group. WiMAX also have a grid. Now, the grids that I'm working out is the WiMAX grid will work in with the power grid, which grid D, multilateral, America, Asia, Australia, Canada, that's all been simulated. So on a global platform, it wouldn't be hard to matrix the world. With Katanning, I would need defence bases in order to do that. I have them. I have ground floor Katanning joint projects, as in joint projects with other countries, America, Canada, US, UN, Joint Projects 2047, that is a terrestrial communication platform. I also have Katanning as Joint Projects 2072, and that is networking the ground force. Now, with having that networking the ground force, as far as being a targeted individual, once I got that paper, I thought my targeting would have finished. Because when joint military, MILSATCOM, when joint operation training goes on in urban environments or any friendly environment, civilians and their property are not meant to be damaged. Now, I was getting damaged with the electronic surveillance. I contacted the Department of Defence, they ignored me. Everyone I spoke to, I contacted, even the Prime Minister of Australia, he ignored me. Now, at that stage, it's very hard to prove something that cannot be seen. And the fact that I am in a civilian in a defence playground that has been damaged, and it did not stop when I notified them, it continued, it actually got harder, it got stronger. That then I am no longer a civilian in my town. I am a prisoner of war in my own home. Now, Australia went to Geneva, and Australia have signed the Geneva Convention as far as the treatment of prisoners and the torture bill. I have been tortured when it comes to neurological. I have physically been tortured, and my body has been used as a human guinea pig. I have not just had through 2 CAT scans beyond any doubt show within 85 days what has been put into me. It's not just what has been put into me, it's what has been removed. The hunks and bits and pieces that have been removed beyond any doubt. You cannot dispute what you can see with your own eyes in a before and after CAT scan in 85 days when I did not leave my house for any form of medical procedures. It was all being done without my consent. The National Health Medical Research Council, I contacted them after my scans. They are aware of it. They have told me to take it up with Department of Defence. Department of Defence know what's going on, and they continue to ignore me. Well, I have got to the point now where I am not going to bite my tongue. I am not going to close my mouth with what I know is going on in Katanning. Like I said, the simulation is just one part of it. The defence platforms are here in Katanning. I am a civilian and I've been treated like a prisoner. I have been tortured by the Australian Government and Department of Defence, and they know it. And I am not going to shut up. I am going to have all the names of everybody that's been involved that I have written down, that other people have. My legal aid in America, human rights, they've got your name. You're not going anywhere, Australia. I'm going to take you down good and proper. My next video I'm going to be doing is on the Great Southern Agriculture Research Institute with its geological coordinated systems name of WGS 84. Now, WGS 84 is an American Air Force platform. It's for the terrestrial communications. It's for the GPS. It's for the geological. It's everything that Peter Campbell has already done. Now, what goes on at the Ag Institute does involve Unit 731. Look it up and see what it was. Look up Unit 731. That university is still doing human medical experimentation. Your country is involved because of the internet, because of the fibre optic cable that's linked the world up, that goes connected, final resting place, the Large Hadron Collider. Now, I'm going to be talking about the Large Hadron Collider, and I'm going to be colliding gamma rays with air molecules because of the WGS-84 Great Southern Agriculture Research Institute, because of the data that has been collected there, along other platforms of data that have been collected in Katanning like the AMI. The AMI, what is the AMI? Let me tell you what the AMI is. The AMI is, too many papers in front of me. The AMI is the Architecture Management Integration Environment for the STEP 210. The STEP is a standard electrical product for the 210 ISO 10303, which takes me on to, it takes me a full circle back to Complex Adaptive Systems, Dr. Matthew Berryman, through the Tiki Wiki, through the Complex Wiki, but I'll save all that for my next video. My next video I'm going to do on the Great Southern Agriculture Research Institute, and it's AMI, it's STEP, it's the magnetic meridian, it's the Magnus. Now the Magnus is the one, that's the biggie. This Magnus project, it for Katanning, it's the IPS Radio Space Server, Sydney DSTO, Defence Science Technology Organisation, DSTO, and Salisbury, Great Southern Agriculture Research Institute. So it's a direct feed from there back into Katanning. Now, the best thing about Katanning is on the Earth you have what they call a magnetic anomaly. And it's not, when you think of the Earth's magnetic field, that's what you see, the spirals. Well, that's above the Earth. Now, on the Earth, from the north and the south magnetic poles, based on old volcanoes from a zillion years ago, leaves magnetic deposits in the ground. And so the magnetic anomaly of the Earth's field, it moves around the Earth. Now, from the South Pole, the first, and like any field, it has a 0, a positive, and a negative. Katanning is 0. Katanning is a rose line. It is a 0. The positive, Australia is very lucky because not many countries have 1, let alone 2 of the magnetic field lines going through it. Katanning 0. Katanning is a rose line. The positive, that will go up to Parkes. Now, Parkes satellite dish, you all know as the dish. It was the dish that worked with Honeysuckle Creek and the moon. So we could watch man walking on the moon live. Well, that's Parkes. So geologically, Australia is the rose line and the positive. The negative, that goes out to sea and goes elsewhere. Now, when we get on to Great Southern Agriculture Research, I'm going to be talking about this rose line, and I'm going to be talking about even bigger misdemeanors of what happens with a nuclear explosion, like Hiroshima or any of those explosions that Department of Defence have done. But I'm not looking at what it's done on ground floor. I'm looking at what happens in those first seconds, nanoseconds of the explosion, and what it does to the gamma rays when they collide, and what happens and how it affects my rose line and my positive and my negative, and how it accelerates and spirals along the Earth's magnetic field lines, and how that could be used to SimCity, to matrix the world, because everything would have to be sped up in order for real time. But we'll get on to that with my next video. Okay, that's all for now. Bye.